Welcome back. We're just getting warmed up, so stick with us. New light is being cast on the FBI's efforts to investigate the Trump campaign. John Solomon's latest piece in the Hill newspaper details internal bureau memos about the pressure applied to Justice Department investigators and their effort to get a warrant on former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. An email exchange between infamous FBI agent Peter Strzok and his lover Lisa Page from October 14th of 2016, just a few weeks before the election, shows their desire to create for then FBI Deputy Director Andy McCabe to help secure that warrant. One email from Strzok reads, in part, and I quote, "At minimum, that keeps the hurry the F up pressure on McCabe." And believe it or not, that is just the tip of the iceberg. Joining us now with reaction is Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch. Tom, thanks for joining us this morning. We buried the lead on this one. I'm going to put another quote up from Peter Strzok. This is from September 26th of 2016. He said, and as a pretext, he said this, and I quote, "At a minimum, the letter that Carter Page wrote provides us a pretext to interview him." Pretext is code for an excuse to interview Carter Page. How explosive is all this?
Oh, it's further confirmation that the Trump-Russia investigation was infected by this hyper-political bias against President Trump, where they're looking for excuses to target his team. You had Page write a letter complaining about an improper FBI leak, and the response from one of the top FBI officials, well, let's use this as an excuse to bring him in and interview him. And then they follow that up with the infamous FISA warrants, which were supported, which would never have been approved but for their reliance on the Clinton DNC dossier. And then another aspect of this, which is also in Solomon's piece, is that right after the election, they are talking about the day after the election, President Trump's elected, they focus on, well, we have to get all the people tied to Paul Manafort and compare notes and figure out what we're going to do there. Well, so Paul Manafort is being targeted not because of anything he did wrong, but the trigger is President Trump's election. Paul Manafort, by the way, right now is in solitary confinement.
Yes.
You know, President Trump should really think about ordering his Justice Department to at least shut this Mueller investigation down or pause it, given all the corruption in its formation in the FBI in 2016.
You're referring to an email from Strzok to Page where they said we need all of their names to scrub and we should give them ours for the same purposes. Scrubbing after the election, never a good look. Carter Page was actually on this network a couple of hours ago on Tucker's program speaking for himself. Listen to what Carter Page said.
Do you expect that you're going to be charged with anything after all of this?
Tucker, I couldn't even imagine anything that I could potentially be charged with. It's just, you know, particularly after seeing John Solomon's article today, it just becomes, you know, the whole, you know, using the term from that quote that you had, pretext. The pretext was absolutely outrageous, ridiculous.
So they found a pretext. Then they surveilled the guy for a year. That sounds like a guy that seems pretty confident they didn't find anything. Was this indeed the witch hunt the president accuses
Carter Page was a cooperating informant with the FBI, and Strzok knew that. That's why they used the phrase pretext. And the spying on Carter Page was a convenient vehicle to get at the Trump operation. And who knows what other FISA warrants and applications were corruptly sent over to the court as well. Carter Page isn't going to be prosecuted. There is no Russia collusion, and the only collusion that we're aware of with respect to Russia is Hillary Clinton using Fusion GPS to gather Russia intelligence to smear Donald Trump. Mueller ought to be investigating how his investigation started if he's looking for Russia collusion.
Tom, help us for a second, though. According to the most recent statement of expenditures, Mueller's operation is ramping up. What does that say to you?
Oh, well, there are no controls over Mueller, practically speaking. Not only does he have all of these other lawyers he's hired, all of which are registered Democrats, no registered Republicans, he's actually going into the Justice Department and, as needed, using other resources informally. So that budget is just a pretend number because the Justice Department's at Mueller's beck and call, an out-of-control investigation that is really abusive in its targeting and of not only President Trump, but people around him.
Wow, I don't know about you, but I love pretend numbers. They're my favorite. Tom Fitton, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Hey, you're welcome, Peter.
You got it. Well, our Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, pushing for a breakthrough in denuclearization talks with North Korea. The Secretary of State is meeting with top officials in the Hermit Kingdom. But fresh questions are now being raised about its commitment to actually ditch their nuclear weapons. There are new reports today that the Hermit Kingdom is working on a submarine capable of firing nuclear-armed missiles. Not a great sign. Joining us now to analyze is Gordon Chang, author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World, along with David Tafuri, a former department official during the Obama administration. Thank you both for being here. Gordon, I'll start with you. You say they've got one shot, which the president has said. What has to happen on this trip for the Secretary of State?
I think the Secretary of State needs to come back with a written commitment from Kim saying, look, giving up nukes, giving up missiles, going to dismantle the weapons infrastructure, and agree to the most intrusive inspections regime on Earth. We need this now because we've seen all these reports, not only the ones about the submarines, but also the increased production of fissile material, working on their plutonium reactor, which has no peaceful purposes, all the rest of it. So we need to know where Kim stands.
David, you know, the last deal we struck, the Iran deal, left a bad taste in a lot of our mouths. What can be done here to avoid the pitfalls, in my opinion, of that deal?
Well, you know, Pete, I agree with Gordon. Pompeo has the hard work now of ironing out the details of the agreement and the summit to denuclearize. That means he has to have a list of things that North Korea is going to do to denuclearize. And those have to be things that we can prove are happening. Otherwise, President Trump and Pompeo cannot say that this is a success. I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, but it means getting Kim Jong-un to really lock down on certain things he's going to do and then having him do those things.
Yes, you know, Gordon, David raises a good point. They got to do it. What happens if, because we've seen these reports in the news media, they're still developing this, they're still doing that. What if we sign a great deal, Pompeo leaves, and then North Korea 2-3 weeks from now, it's clear that they're cheating? What do we do next?
I think that we go back to the maximum pressure campaign, which is way Kim got to the bargaining table in the first place. So, for instance, that means tightening sanctions on North Korea, but more important, going after North Korea's major power sponsors, the Russians and the Chinese.
Is China being helpful right now?
No. And President Trump actually intimated that when he said that after that second summit between Kim and Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, that the North Korean attitude became much more difficult. You know, China has been busting sanctions, been very open about it. Chinese banks have continued to launder money for the North Koreans, and we have not imposed the costs on Beijing, and we got to do that.
Absolutely. David, from the view of someone who worked for the Obama administration, do you feel like having folks that North Korea is worried about, whether it's John Bolton or Mike Pompeo, does that help at the table for them to realize if they don't do it, they might see even more than maximum pressure?
You know, I worked on the Obama campaign. I'm not sure if that helps or not. That may have gotten us to this point, especially some of the rhetoric by Trump and Pompeo's real shuttle diplomacy, which has been really effective. But right now, the only thing that's going to result in actual progress is having North Korea actually demonstrate that it's pulling out of certain things. Now, we heard news this week that there's satellite imagery showing that North Korea is still using some of the nuclear sites. It's still actively using them. That's a bad sign, like the submarine example that you gave as well. So this is the hard work that Pompeo has to do.
Absolutely. One of the things David just referred to is South Korean lawmakers said that it looks like they're developing a new submarine capable of launching nuclear-armed ballistic missiles. Is that a hedge in case this doesn't work, Gordon, or is this a thumbing of the nose?
Well, I think it's a thumbing of the nose. The North Koreans have been working on missiles launched from submarines for a very long time. They actually launched a missile from under the surface of the Sea of Japan, August 24th, 2016. They have Russian technology to do this. So this has been a long-term project of theirs. I think they're just accelerating what they've done before.
David, I appreciate your fair-mindedness on this as someone who's had to be defensive about certain things. As you look at the prospects of this deal, because we all want it to work, is it an over 50% chance that it happens, or are you pessimistic?
I think it's a 50% chance that this is going to move forward in a productive way. But I think it's real high stakes for the Trump administration because this is now their #1 foreign policy objective, and they don't have much else to show on the foreign policy front other than North Korea, which could be fantastic if North Korea really does take legitimate, identifiable steps to denuclearize. 50%.
Well, and if the flip side is war or the threat of war, you certainly don't want that side either. Appreciate you both. Great insights this evening.